In case you were wondering, no, this is still not a good time to talk about the fact that this guy looks just like me, or in fact why he's called Kin. For the third time, a Dream rematch is a much faster, tougher, and far more threatening version of something we've already defeated. But I'd say the Lost Kin is probably the most similar to his base form, almost deceptively so. Everything he does is indeed faster, his attacks crack off more frequently, and they just about all have less wind-up, but as far as our strategy goes, we can't really treat this as just the same fight but faster. But we'll get into that after the attacks. Once again, we have the dash and slash, the aerial slash, the splashdown, the jump, the flail, and summon balloon. You may notice that we're actually missing one from the Broken Vessel fight, Outbreak. This is a peculiar case where the harder fight actually drops an attack from the repertoire, and I am not complaining. That attack is absurd. The dash and slash, aerial slash, jump, and flail are all relatively unchanged apart from the fact that he uses them more frequently. His jumps, in the case of the aerial slash and jump, are significantly faster, especially his falls. What this means for us is that we have to be especially cautious every time he leaves the ground, or else some unlucky positioning could get us caught off guard. Golden rule of jumps, of course, always try to move towards rather than away from. I'll go over it in more detail once we actually get to the game plan, but essentially, you want to make sure that you're not already committed to an attack right as he's starting one. So we're going to primarily attack him either during or immediately after his attacks, and not during the gaps in between. The splashdown has received a minor upgrade, sending out 6 more closely spaced projectiles instead of 4. This makes it harder to dodge if you're further away from him, but just as before, as long as we stick close to his landing spot, they're not really a factor. Summon Balloon, on the other hand, yikes. This is what really makes this fight a step up from the Broken Vessel. Unlike before, these will start spawning after he's only lost 50 health. The intervals between each balloon start at about 3 seconds and seem to get shorter as the fight goes on. In addition, the fact that he doesn't use Outbreak means that they will never stop spawning until the kin is dead, and will never despawn on their own. They still only have 1 HP, thank goodness, but the sheer volume of these things makes them a constant nuisance at best. You need to prioritize their defeat over dealing damage to the Lost Kin whenever they appear, or you're bound to bump into one. They also make healing nearly impossible without exact timing, so unlike the Soul Tyrant and the Failed Champion, we have a lot less room for error. So really, this is a boss fight against an infinite swarm of balloons, and also Lost Kin is here too. But how are we going to go about it? Well, as you may have come to expect, we're always going to reset to center stage, or at least a safe distance from the Lost Kin if he's at the center, and we're going to let him come to us. As I said before, we're primarily going to land strikes either during or immediately after his attacks. Watch him closely for the downtime in between attacks so that you have the best chance of dodging whatever he throws at you next. While we're waiting for him to attack, you'll want to focus on the balloons. Killing them is top priority, but it might take some fancy footwork depending on where they spawn and what attack the Lost Kin uses. Don't forget we have a double jump now, which gives us a plethora of new options while we're in the air. What once would have spelled a certain hit can now be avoided with the touch of a button, so keep it in mind. The one upside of the balloon's incessant spawn rate is that you'll never be hurting for soul during this fight. So while I don't recommend chasing down Lost Kin just to get an attack off, firing a Vengeful Spirit from a safe distance is a great idea. His high knockback can even force him to get hit twice with a single shot pretty easily. The main thing to keep in mind is that the Lost Kin is not the Broken Vessel. With the Vessel, we could essentially bully him into submission with his high knockback and low stagger stats. Lost Kin has the same knockback and some even lower stagger stats, but the absolute frequency of his attacks means that you have to play this way safer. Finally, charm recommendations. I absolutely recommend Quick Focus to at least scrape together some healing while he's staggered, but other than that, it's up to you. Don't forget that the fight is a dream, so you can equip some fragile charms if you want. Okay, bear all that in mind and we've as good as won. I guess you could say, this kin has already lost! And that is going to be the Dream rematch against the Broken Vessel, the Lost Kin. And technically we have already seen his Attuned form. It is identical in every way to the boss fight we had against him way back when. The biggest differences, of course, now would then be our own changes in abilities. The Shade Cloak is a huge help for dodging many of the attacks that he does, but more importantly, I would say, the Descending Dark is a fantastic skill for... ooh, shoot. that doesn't bode well, is a fantastic skill for just clearing the room of the incessant balloons that he summons. Not too bad there, though. His ascended form is no different from what you'd expect, but the sheer frequency of his attacks could definitely lead to you taking some untoward damage. The fact that the balloons do double damage is a bit of an oddity. Of course, obviously, in an ascended fight, everything, even spikes, does double damage. But something about just how weak the balloons appear lends an odd feeling to taking that huge, meaty double hit from him. Okay, that was pretty rough, I have to admit. Heading into Radiant, I have said a few times in the past that the difficulty of Radiant bosses, with the little setting that I have showing, basically doesn't matter. Just because the numbers are so high, there's almost no point in comparing them. But, just for fun, I do want to point out that the Lost Kin here on Radiant is the highest difficulty boss we have yet fought, to the point that he's the first one to exceed 50 on my difficulty scale. And I think that's fun. Biggest tip I can recommend against his Radiant form is to be very free with your spells, and over-charming to the point that you have Soul Eater can definitely help. The Shade Soul is super helpful, not only because of the damage it does, but also because of how much it knocks him back. Him being an exceptionally vulnerable boss to knock back makes it a powerful tool to deal with him. And wow, that really just wasn't bad at all. Thanks again for watching Boss Blitz, my friends. As always, do feel free to click the playlist in the top left if there's any context that you felt was missing from the clips shown in this video. We're not quite done fighting our doppelgangers yet. Next, we're going after Nosk.